The wind howled across the frozen battlefield, carrying with it the echo of distant gunfire and the faint scent of burning metal. Snowflakes clung to Sergeant Cole's face as he trudged through the knee-deep snow, his rifle slung across his chest. The white wasteland stretched endlessly, a graveyard of shattered machines and fallen soldiers. His breath came in short bursts, fogging the air before him. He was here for survivors, though he doubted there would be any left. The cold alone was enough to kill within hours, but war had made the odds far worse. A sudden movement caught his eye. At first he thought it was just a patch of ice catching the light. Then he saw it, a figure lying face down in the snow, a halo of white hair spread across the ground. His boots crunched as he approached, the sound strangely loud in the stillness. She looked fragile, almost carved from ice, her skin pale against the snow. But it wasn't her beauty that made him stop. It was her eyes. When she opened them, they glowed an unnatural green that pierced through the frost-covered air. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Cole dropped to one knee, brushing snow from her face. She flinched at his touch, as though she expected pain. Her clothes weren't standard military issue. Light, form-fitting fabric with patterns that shimmered faintly. Jewelry glinted faintly, beneath the frost on her wrist. He didn't recognize the design, but it screamed of a culture far from Earth. Still, she was alive, barely. Her breath was weak, and her fingers twitched feebly against the snow. Cole reached into his pack for a thermal blanket, knowing that every second counted. As he wrapped her trembling body, he scanned the horizon for threats. The battlefield was eerily quiet now, but quiet never meant safe. His visor displayed faint motion markers, too far to identify. She tried to push away from him, but her strength failed. The sound she made was a low, pleading whisper. It was a language he didn't know, but there was fear in her voice. He hushed her gently, telling her she was safe now. But inside, he wasn't sure if that was true. Not when he had no idea who or what she was. He lifted her into his arms, surprised at how light she was. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and her glowing eyes blinked slowly, as if struggling to stay open. The warmth from his body seemed to ease her shivering. His boots sank into the snow as he began the long trek back to the extraction point. Every step was a battle against the biting wind and the weight of both his gear and the fragile life he carried. Yet he felt an odd sense of responsibility, as if fate had placed her in his path for a reason. Behind them, shadows moved among the wreckage. Cole didn't see them at first, but the faint crunch of snow made him glance back. Figures in dark armor were advancing slowly, their shapes distorted by the haze. They moved with an unnatural precision that made his skin crawl. He shifted his grip on the girl, tightening it protectively. She stirred weakly, her hand clutching at his jacket as if she sensed the danger too. His pace quickened, though he knew running would draw attention. He had to keep moving, had to get her to safety before those figures closed in. Snow swirled around them, forming a blinding curtain. Cole's visor kept flashing warnings about low visibility and dropping temperatures. He adjusted his course toward the faint beacon of the evac point, marked by a pulsing light barely visible through the storm. The girl's breathing grew steadier, though she still trembled. Her glowing eyes never left his face, watching him with an intensity that made him feel as though she was trying to read his thoughts. He wondered if she even knew he was human, or if his armor made him look as alien to her as she did to him. They finally reached the ridge overlooking the extraction site. A small shuttle waited below, engines humming against the cold. Cole exhaled in relief, but the feeling was short-lived. The dark-armored figures had followed, their shapes emerging through the snow like predators closing in on prey. Cole tightened his hold on the girl and began the descent toward the shuttle, knowing they had only moments before the danger reached them. He didn't know her name, her origins, or why those things were hunting her. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let her die here. Cole's boots crunched against the frozen ground as he half ran, half slid down the ridge. The girl in his arms stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. That strange, brilliant, green gaze met his again, and for a moment the chaos faded. She whispered something soft, almost melodic, but he still couldn't understand the words. He kept moving, heart pounding faster with every step. Behind them, the armored figures advanced. With cold precision, their dark shapes growing larger against the pale snow. The shuttle crew had seen him. One of them waved frantically from the ramp, shouting into a comm. Cole pushed harder, his legs burning. The girl's head rested limply against his chest, and he could feel the tremors still shaking her body. The wind roared in his ears, carrying. With it the metallic scent of blood and the faint hum of approaching engines. He knew he couldn't stop, not even to aim his rifle. Every second mattered, and the shadows closing in were far faster than they looked. A sudden flash of light tore through the storm as one of the armored pursuers fired. The beam scorched the snow just meters behind them, sending up a cloud of ice crystals. Cole gritted his teeth and shifted the girl's weight to free one hand. He drew his sidearm, firing back blindly to force them to slow down. His shots hit the snow and debris, but it bought him precious seconds. The girl's glowing eyes shifted toward the attackers, and something in her gaze sharpened, as if she recognized them. They reached the base of the ridge, the shuttle's hum now louder than the wind. 2 crew members ran toward them, weapons raised. Cole shouted for cover fire, and the soldiers obeyed, sending bursts of energy toward the ridge. The armored figures slowed, their formation breaking slightly. Cole used the opening to sprint, the last few meters. His muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. The girl's faint breathing against his chest reminded him why he had to keep moving. As he stepped onto the shuttle ramp, the crew leader grabbed his arm. "What is she?" the man demanded, eyes darting to the girl's unnatural features. Cole didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. All he knew was that she was freezing, injured, and alive. He carried her inside, laying her gently on a bench, near the heater. She blinked slowly, the faintest trace of color returning to her cheeks. Even in her weakened state, there was an otherworldly grace to her that made it impossible to look away. The shuttle doors sealed with a hiss, and the engines roared to life. Outside, the dark armored figures fired one last volley, but the shots glanced off the hull. The craft lifted, snow whipping in violent spirals below. Cole sank into a seat across from the girl, his rifle resting against his knee. She watched him with a strange intensity, her lips moving in silent words. It was as if she was trying to tell him something important, something urgent. But her strength failed before she could finish. One of the medics knelt beside her, scanning her vitals with a portable device. His brow furrowed almost instantly. "She's not on any known species registry," he muttered. Cole kept his eyes on her, ignoring the startled looks from the rest of the crew. The medic began wrapping her in thermal layers, adjusting the heater output. She closed her eyes briefly, her breathing deepening. For a fleeting moment, Cole thought she might finally be safe, but deep down, he knew the trouble wasn't over. Through the shuttle's small window, the white wasteland stretched, endlessly until it disappeared into the clouds. Cole leaned back, but his mind refused to rest. Who was she? Why were those soldiers chasing her? And why did her eyes seem to hold both fear and trust whenever they looked at him? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain: saving her had just made him a part of something far bigger than the war he thought he was fighting. The shuttle cut through the storm, its engines humming steadily as the battlefield faded behind them. Cole kept his eyes on the girl, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. She was bundled now in thick thermal wraps, but her skin still held a faint bluish tone from the cold. Her hair, white as the snow outside, framed her face like frost-laced silk. She stirred, her glowing green eyes opening once more, and for the first time her gaze seemed calmer, as if she sensed she was beyond immediate danger. The medic checked her vitals again, his expression still tense. "She's stable for now, but her body temperature was dangerously low," he said. Cole nodded, though his mind was still elsewhere. He kept replaying the moment he'd found her in the snow, the sight of those armored figures, and the way she had looked at them. She hadn't just been running for her life. She had been running from something she knew well. That thought made his grip tighten on his rifle. From the cockpit, the pilot's voice came over the comm. "ETA to base is 15 minutes. Buckle in." Cole didn't move from his seat. His eyes stayed locked on her as the medic adjusted the heater closer. She reached out suddenly, her fingers brushing Cole's gloved hand. The touch was light, hesitant, but there was a silent plea in it. He leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice as he spoke to her. "You're safe now," he said, though a part of him doubted the words. The shuttle jolted slightly, and Cole's gaze flicked to the window. A dark shape had emerged from the clouds, moving parallel to them. It was sleek and angular, unlike any craft in the human fleet. A second later, another appeared on the opposite side. The crew exchanged tense glances, and the pilot's voice came again, sharper this time. "We've got company. Hold on." Cole shifted his position, placing himself between the girl and the door, his instincts telling him that the danger had followed them. The alien ships matched their speed, their dark hulls reflecting faint streaks of light. Cole could feel the tension in the cabin rise. The girl's glowing eyes fixed on the shapes outside, and her fingers clenched around the thermal blanket. She whispered something again, a single word this time, but it was spoken with enough fear to chill him more than the icy air had. Whatever she said, it was not a name. It was a warning. The pilot banked sharply, trying to shake their pursuers. The shuttle groaned under the strain, and Cole braced himself against the wall. The medic secured his equipment, shouting over the engine noise. "Those ships aren't firing. They're just tracking us." Cole didn't find comfort in that. It only meant they wanted something aboard intact, and there was no question in his mind what, or rather, who that was. The girl's breathing had quickened, and her eyes darted between the two vessels. Suddenly, a crackling transmission filled the cabin. It wasn't in any human language, but Cole could see recognition flash across the girl's face. Her lips moved, silently forming words she seemed too afraid to speak aloud. The medic glanced at Cole as if waiting for orders. Cole ignored the comm and focused on the girl. "Do you know them?" he asked. She looked at him with a strange mix of sorrow and certainty, then gave the smallest nod. The pilot's voice cut in again, urgent. "We're making a run for the base. Hold tight." The engines roared as the shuttle surged forward, breaking away from the alien craft for now. Cole stayed where he was, still watching her. In that moment, he knew without a doubt that she was no ordinary survivor. Her presence had already drawn the enemy this far, and it would bring them again. Yet despite that truth, he also knew he would not hand her over to anyone. The shuttle descended through heavy cloud cover, the turbulence rattling every loose panel inside. Cole kept one steadying hand on the bench where the girl lay, ensuring she didn't slide as the craft shuddered. Her eyes were closed now, but he could tell she wasn't asleep. The faint tension in her brow and the way her fingers gripped the blanket told him she was listening, sensing every movement and sound around them. The medic glanced between her and his scanner, still unsettled by the readings. When the base finally came into view, it looked like little more than a cluster of dark structures half buried in snow. The landing pad's floodlights cut through the storm, casting stark beams against the white. The pilot brought them down with practiced speed, and the moment the ramp lowered, cold air rushed in. Cole moved quickly, lifting the girl into his arms once more. She was warmer now, but still fragile, her weight feeling almost too light for someone who had survived a battlefield. Two soldiers met them at the base entrance, both eyeing the girl with open suspicion. One reached for a comm unit, clearly ready to report her arrival. Cole stepped forward, his voice firm as he told them she was under his protection until cleared by command. They hesitated but eventually moved aside, allowing him to carry her inside. The warmth of the base hit them immediately, a stark contrast to the frozen wasteland outside. She blinked at the sudden change, her eyes reflecting the artificial light in a way that almost seemed to glow brighter. The medic led them to the infirmary, where the equipment hummed quietly. Cole set her down on a narrow bed, staying close, as the medics began running more advanced scans. The images flickered across a screen, revealing strange internal patterns that didn't match human anatomy. A murmur went through the room as the chief medical officer leaned closer to the display. "She's not like anything in our database," he said. Cole simply crossed his arms, already certain of that fact long before the machines confirmed it. While the scans continued, Cole noticed her watching him closely. Her gaze was steady, almost searching, as if she was measuring the distance between them. He wondered if she was trying to decide whether he was truly her ally or just another captor. He met her eyes, offering no threats and no promises, only a silent assurance that he wasn't going to abandon her. For a moment, something in her expression softened, and she reached up to adjust the blanket around her shoulders. The chief medic eventually turned to Cole, his tone serious. "If those ships outside were looking for her, it means she's important to them. And if she's important to them, command will want answers fast." Cole gave a short nod, though the thought of her being questioned by military intelligence didn't sit well with him. He'd seen too many interrogations break people apart, and something told him that whatever she had been through was already enough to scar anyone. He decided he'd be there when they tried to speak with her. Not long after, the base alarms gave a sharp warning tone. The sound was short-lived, but enough to make everyone glance toward the walls. A young officer rushed into the infirmary, reporting that unidentified signals had been picked up on the long-range sensors. Cole felt the shift in the room's mood instantly. He didn't need to hear the rest to know what it meant. The girl's eyes widened faintly, confirming his thoughts before the officer even spoke the words. "They're coming back," the officer said, his voice carrying both urgency and unease. Cole looked at her, then at the door, already making up his mind. He knew the base wouldn't be able to withstand a focused assault if those ships decided to land. The only way to keep her safe would be to move her again, away from any place the enemy could reach, and if that meant going against direct orders, then so be it. Cole didn't waste time once the decision formed in his mind. He grabbed his rifle, checked the charge, and pulled his winter gear back on. The girl watched him closely, her eyes flicking between his movements, as if trying to guess what he intended. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so the medics wouldn't hear. "We're leaving," he said firmly. She didn't reply, but the way her fingers tightened around the blanket told him she understood. Whether she trusted him completely or not, she was willing to follow. The alarms faded, replaced by the low thrum of the base's defensive systems powering up. Cole knew those systems wouldn't hold against the kind of ships he had seen. He signaled to the medic on duty that he was taking her to a secure location. The man hesitated but didn't argue. Perhaps he sensed the urgency in Cole's tone. Cole lifted her gently from the bed, adjusting his grip so her head rested against his shoulder. Even through the layers of cloth, he could feel her shivering. Again, moving through the base's narrow corridors, Cole kept his pace steady but quick. Soldiers passed them, most too focused on their own tasks to question him. He kept his head down, avoiding any unnecessary attention. The hangar was his goal, specifically the small reconnaissance crafts that could slip through enemy scanners, if flown low enough. He had used them before during covert missions, and one of them might be their only chance to disappear into the storm outside. When they reached the hangar, the air smelled faintly of fuel and heated metal. Technicians were rushing to secure larger ships, but Cole headed straight for a smaller craft at the far end. It was half hidden behind supply crates, its canopy already dusted with frost from earlier flights. He set the girl down carefully inside, the cockpit strapping her in with quick, practiced motions. Her eyes followed every move, and she reached out briefly to touch his arm, a silent question in her gaze. He crouched beside her, making his voice steady. "I'll get us out. Just hold on." She gave the faintest nod, then settled back in, the seat. Cole climbed into the pilot's chair and began the startup sequence. The engines whined softly, their hum barely audible over the distant rumble of the storm. On his display, the base's perimeter sensors showed approaching contacts, too many to fight, even if every gun on the base opened fire. They had to leave before those ships landed. Cole eased the craft toward the secondary hangar exit, a narrow launch tunnel that led straight into the blizzard beyond. His hands moved with precision, every motion drilled into muscle memory from years of flying. The moment the doors began to open, icy wind blasted into the tunnel, carrying a thick curtain of snow. The girl's glowing eyes caught the faint light from the control panels, making them shine almost unnaturally bright in the dim cabin. Her gaze stayed fixed ahead, unblinking. The craft shot out into the storm, instantly swallowed by swirling white. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, but Cole kept their altitude low, skimming just above the jagged ice ridges that marked the frozen landscape. His focus was absolute. One wrong move and they could crash, but climbing higher would make them a beacon to anyone scanning the area. The girl shifted slightly in her seat, glancing back toward the direction of the base. Whatever she saw or sensed made her shoulders tense. Cole didn't look back. He knew the enemy wouldn't stop searching. Not until they had her again. The storm was their cover for now, but it wouldn't last forever. His priority was finding a place to hide, somewhere even advanced sensors would struggle to reach. He tightened his grip on the controls, feeling the craft respond instantly. The hum of the engines filled the small space, steady and strong, carrying them both farther away from the danger that still hunted them. The storm raged around them, the small craft buffeted by fierce gusts of wind. Cole kept a firm hand on the controls, guiding them through the blinding white. His visor's display highlighted terrain features beneath the snow, helping him avoid hidden ridges and steep drops. The girl sat silently in her seat, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse ahead. The stormlight flickered across her features, making her look like a figure carved from ice and fire at the same time. An hour passed before Cole spotted a break in the landscape, a cluster of jagged cliffs that jutted from the ground like the teeth of some ancient beast. Between them lay a narrow canyon, partially shielded from the worst of the wind. He angled the craft downward, skimming the icy walls until they found a deep crevice near the base. The sensors showed minimal energy interference, making it the perfect place to hide. Cole brought the craft to a slow landing, the engine's hum fading into the cold silence. Once the canopy opened, the freezing air rushed in, carrying the faint scent of mineral-rich ice. Cole helped the girl from her seat, keeping a steadying arm around her. She was still weak, her movements careful and deliberate. But there was a spark in her eyes now that hadn't been there before. The cliff walls rose high above them, forming a shelter that felt almost like the bones of the planet itself. Snow drifted down gently from narrow gaps far overhead. Cole led her toward the darker end of the crevice, where natural rock formations created small alcoves. He checked his portable scanner again. No signs of pursuit yet. Setting up a small heater from the craft's emergency kit, he motioned for her to sit beside it. The warm glow reflected off her pale hair, melting the frost from her clothes. For the first time since finding her, he saw her shoulders relax slightly as she drew her knees close and let the heat seep into her skin. She watched him as he moved around the alcove, securing the perimeter with motion sensors and a low-powered shield emitter. When he finally sat opposite her, she reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing his gloved hand. The contact was brief, but it carried a weight he couldn't ignore. She was trying to communicate something more than words could carry. He didn't speak, letting the moment stretch between them, a silent pact forming without either of them fully understanding it. After a long pause, she began to speak in her own language. The sounds were soft, flowing, unlike any tongue Cole had heard before. Though he couldn't understand, her tone told him enough. She was telling him something important, her gaze never leaving his. At one point, her voice trembled, and she placed her hand over her chest, then pointed toward the sky. He guessed she was speaking of the ships that had chased them, and perhaps the place she had come from. Cole nodded slowly, letting her know he was listening, even if he couldn't grasp every meaning. He pointed to himself, then to her, and finally, to the surrounding cliffs. "Safe," he said firmly. She tilted her head, studying him, and after a moment she repeated the word in a careful, accented voice. It was the first human word she had spoken, and hearing it from her lips made him feel something he couldn't quite define. Whatever bond was forming, it was becoming stronger with every passing moment. Night began to fall, though in this frozen world the change was more a dimming of the pale light than true darkness. Cole checked their supplies, knowing they couldn't stay hidden forever. The enemy would search every ridge, every canyon until they found her again. But for now, in this sheltered place, they had time. Time to plan. Time to understand each other, and perhaps time to decide what their next move would be in a fight that was no longer just his own. The wind softened overnight, leaving the canyon in an eerie stillness. Cole woke first, his instincts keeping him alert, even in the relative safety of their hiding place. The girl was still asleep, curled beside the small heater, her pale hair spilling over the blanket like threads of silver. He stepped outside the alcove, scanning the sky above the cliffs. Thin rays of light cut through the narrow gaps, revealing a calm that would not last for long. Somewhere out there, the enemy was still searching. He returned quietly to the shelter and set a small pot of water to heat over the portable burner. The scent of warming metal and faint steam filled the air. The girl stirred at the sound, blinking slowly before her gaze found him. She didn't speak, but her expression carried a question. Cole poured the water into a ration pack and handed it to her. She accepted it with both hands, sipping cautiously. For a moment they shared a rare silence, one without fear pressing at their backs. When she finished, she gestured toward the open sky, then traced a pattern on the rock floor with her finger. It was a series of symbols, intricate yet precise. Cole watched closely, recognizing that she was trying to tell him something important. He pointed to the first symbol, raising a brow. She nodded, then drew another mark that looked like a ship. It didn't take long for him to understand. She was mapping a route, a way to somewhere far beyond this frozen wasteland. Cole studied the marks she had drawn. They were unlike any navigation charts he had seen, but the structure suggested accuracy. She tapped one of the symbols repeatedly, her gaze hardening. He guessed it was her destination, or perhaps a place of safety. But her next gestures painted a darker picture. She mimed the movement of ships surrounding that point, then crossed her arms sharply. It was a warning, one he didn't need a translator to comprehend. The path was dangerous, but it was also necessary. He weighed their options. Staying in the canyon was temporary at best. The enemy had resources, and once they cleared the storm zone, their sensors would sweep every hidden pocket of terrain. Moving meant risk, but it was the only way forward. Cole nodded, tapping the ship-like mark on the ground, then pointing to her. "We go," he said. She met his gaze, her glowing eyes unreadable for a long moment, before she finally gave a slow, deliberate nod. Cole began preparing the craft again, brushing frost from the canopy and checking the power levels. The girl helped in small ways, passing tools, securing equipment, her movements slow but deliberate. It was clear she understood the urgency. Once everything was ready, he guided her into the seat beside him. The hum of the engines filled the narrow space, vibrating through the icy rock walls. The moment they lifted off, snow swirled upward, marking their departure for anyone watching from above. They climbed out of the canyon and leveled into a low flight path. Cole followed the approximate direction she had shown, skimming the icy plains and weaving between frozen ridges. The world around them was an endless stretch of white and gray, broken only by the occasional shadow of a jagged cliff. The girl kept her eyes on the horizon, her hands gripping the straps across her chest. She didn't speak, but he could feel her tension growing with every passing minute. The first sign of trouble came when the radar pinged faintly. 2 contacts, distant but closing. Cole's jaw tightened as he adjusted their course, skirting the edge of a frozen canyon to break line of sight. The girl glanced at the display, then at him, and he saw understanding flash in her eyes. This wasn't the end of the pursuit. It was only the beginning, and whatever waited at her destination would be far more dangerous than the cold chasing them now. The contacts on the radar grew closer, their movement patterns too precise to be random. Cole kept the craft low, banking between ice ridges to stay hidden. The girl leaned forward slightly, her glowing eyes scanning the terrain ahead. She pointed toward a narrow fissure in the ice, almost invisible to the naked eye. Without hesitation, Cole steered toward it, trusting her instinct. The craft slipped into the gap, the walls rising high on both sides and swallowing them in shadow. Inside the fissure, the light dimmed, replaced by a pale blue glow reflecting from the frozen walls. The girl reached out to touch the surface, her fingers tracing faint markings carved into the ice. Cole glanced at them briefly before focusing on the controls, but he noticed her expression shift. There was recognition there. This place meant something to her. The path twisted sharply, forcing him to slow the craft to a crawl. Outside, the hum of the engines echoed off the ancient walls like a heartbeat. The fissure opened suddenly into a hidden basin surrounded by jagged ice cliffs that shielded it from the sky. In the center stood a massive crystalline structure, its spires catching the faint light and scattering it into shimmering colors. The girl's breath caught, her eyes wide as she took in the sight. Cole slowed to a hover before landing near the edge. She unbuckled herself quickly, stepping out into the snow with a grace that belied her earlier weakness. Cole followed her, rifle in hand, scanning the basin for threats. The air here felt different, thicker, almost humming with energy. The girl walked toward the crystalline spire, her movements purposeful. When she reached it, she placed both hands against the surface, and the structure responded with a soft, resonant tone. Light rippled outward from her touch, running along the spire like veins of molten silver. Cole felt the hair on his arms rise beneath his gear. A deep vibration shook the ground, though it wasn't violent. Instead, it felt deliberate, as if the very earth was acknowledging her presence. The girl turned back to Cole, her expression no longer uncertain. For the first time, there was authority in her stance, a quiet power that made her seem far older than she looked. She gestured for him to join her, and though every instinct told him to be cautious, he stepped forward until the crystalline light washed over them both. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was in perfect human English. "You saved me without knowing who I was," she said. "But now you must know." She turned slightly, gesturing toward the spire. "This is the heart of Aelthar, the last sanctuary of my people. The ones who hunt me do so because I carry the right to awaken it, and, with it, the power to end their war." Cole stared at her, the truth settling over him like the cold air around them. The ground beneath the spire shifted again, revealing a hidden chamber of light. She stepped toward it, then paused and looked back at him. "I cannot do this alone," she said. "But if you help me, you will be marked by my people as one of our own. That bond is unbreakable even in death." Cole met her gaze, seeing the weight of her words reflected there. He knew this was no longer just about keeping her alive. It was about standing against something far greater. Cole stepped forward until he was beside her, his hand brushing the edge of the crystalline surface. "Then we finish this together," he said simply. She nodded once, a faint but genuine smile touching her lips. As the spire's light grew brighter, the basin seemed to hold its breath. The hunt outside would continue, but here, in this moment, they had chosen their path, not as soldier and stranger, but as allies bound by a choice neither could undo.